Hi, welcome to another video. This is Rai. So this is a continuation of the Mpesa integration series, and today I just want us to look at STK Push because I've heard a lot of people asking me about STK Push, and today I just want us to go through that. So last time we put our code into production. Not really into production but online, so that we could be able to receive live transactions from Safaricom, even though it's still sandbox. But today I just want us to look at STK Push. I've prepared a table just in case, so that when Safaricom pushes transactions to our website, we are able to see them. But for now, let's get started. So now, in order for us to start, we need to go to the developer. If you haven't created an account, I already logged into mine, but if you haven't created an account, you can head over to Safaricom and create your account. But STK Push, once you come to your account, developer account, and then you go to APIs, you can check for STK Push. So this is for confirming the status, and this is for querying the transaction from Safaricom, and this is for pushing the transaction. So cool. So this is what we need, at least for starters. And like I always advise people, you can also look at the official package that these guys give you. It has some cool examples on how you can do this. So yeah, you can come here and look for whatever you want. If it's a STK Push, here it is. So it gives you a good example, especially if you're PHP. I don't know if there's one for another language, but for now, since I'm doing Laravel, we are going to focus on PHP. So let's see what they're telling us. So use this API to initiate online payment on behalf of a customer. So what this does is, if you call that API with the right parameters, it prompts you on your phone, and all you have to do is to enter your PIN. You accept and then enter your PIN. If you cancel it, it also cancels the transaction. Cool. So now what we need to send them are these parameters: the business shortcode, that's our paybill number, a password. This is what we will provide. It's a combination of your shortcode, passkey, they also provide that, and then the timestamp. You generate that in this format, and then you also send them a timestamp, transaction type. I think they only accept this. I read somewhere they only support customer pay bill online, so you can't do STK Push with buy goods, a till number. So the amount, party A, this is the phone number sending the money. Party B, this is the short code. Yeah, this can be the same as the business short code above. So phone number is the number to receive the STK pin prompt. So yeah, and then callback URLs. So this is a URL on your website where the response can be sent. And then account reference. This is the account number. It can be some sort of account number on your website. Response parameters. These are what you get. So merchant request ID, checkout request ID. So immediately you send this request. This is what you get back. So these parameters here, what you get back. So the most important thing here, I think, is this. So you can save this to the database, and this, because when they send you the transaction, you will pull the transaction using this, and then you can fill it with the right details. So the response code is what will help you to determine whether the transaction was went through or did not. So this is a numeric status code that indicates the status of the transaction submission. 0 means successful. Any other code means an error occurred. So you check for 0. If 0 is what you get, and then you can proceed to save the transaction. Cool. Now results parameters returned whether a transaction is successful or not. So cool. So whether the transaction failed or it went through, you'll always get these parameters here. So like we said, once you get this feedback from the immediate response, you can save this to the database, these two, and then when Safaricom hits your callback, you can load the transaction from the database, that particular record, and then you can fill it with the details. So these ones, you check for this and you check for this using the parameters that you saved. So remember, you get this and this twice, so it's good. It helps you to identify the transaction. So yeah, cool. Results parameters returned only when the transaction is successfully processed. So if you have this, then you can save it, you can update the transaction in the database, right? So the most important thing is to check for is this result code. If it's 0, you know everything is successful, and you can save it, update it, right? Cool. So this is the endpoint, at least for Sandbox. Another important thing to note is that if you go to your applications, if you are going to try STK push, you have to make sure that, for example, if I check my app, if I check products, it's only Mpesa Sandbox. So Mpesa online is different. So you make sure you edit your product and also check Lipa na Mpesa Sandbox, because this is different. So STK push is here on Lipa na Mpesa Sandbox. So make sure you do that if you're up. Otherwise, you will not be able to get an authentication code. What do we call this code? Authentication token. Yeah. So it will be rejected all the time. You'll be getting invalid token or something, some error like that. So make sure you do that. So for me, I'll be using this app, and as you can see, products, it has both Mpesa Sandbox and Mpesa Express Sandbox. So once you have these two for your app, then now you can use those particular credentials for your work. And then you can also go to test credentials, so that you can get your test credentials. So for the Lipa na Mpesa online shortcode, you make sure you use this one. And passkey, you also use your passkey. And the phone number, you can use this. So whenever they're asking for a shortcode, you put this. Whenever they're asking for a phone number, you put this. And whenever they ask for a passkey, you use this, right? So you can take those and save them in your configuration files. Yeah, I think, and I'll be updating this code here. So in case you don't, in case you want to follow along again. But whenever I go to another, I keep changing it, so it's just good to follow the video. I keep changing it, but once you download the code, you'll be able to see where I push everything, because the more we build, the more it becomes complex and the more it needs more reorganization. Otherwise, thank you. Let's dive into code. Right, so the first thing you want to do is to prepare the database. So like I always advise, if you want to know what fields to use in the database, you just come to this Mpesa SDK thing, PHP SDK, and you can see SDK push. STK push is here, request callback. So these fields, you need to have at least these fields. So any other additional fields you can have on your database, but then at least at a minimum, you should have these fields here, because when the response comes, you'll be able to add this to your database. Cool. Now, once you do that, so I already prepared my database. Like I said, I just took these fields and I made them snake case, because I don't like saving camel case in the database. So cool. So I have all those fields. I have results description, result code. This is showing whether the transaction was successful or not, merchant request ID, and everything else that we need. So once you have your migration, the next step is to create a class to handle the actual transaction processing. Yeah, so for me, I'd like to keep my classes in a separate place within Laravel, so that it doesn't mess with the rest of the code. So for me, I put it in MISC for miscellaneous, and then payment, and then Mpesa, and then APIs. So inside the APIs, you can see we have C2B register, and STK push. So STK push, I already created the class here, so I need to write the necessary classes. And as you can tell, we need two methods, one to initiate simulation and another one to receive the transaction. So if you are going to use routes, of course, you need to create controllers for those. So I did create controllers here in API, and then version 1, just in case you want to change it in future. In case Safaricom changes the thing, you can do that. So version 1, and then payment, and then Mpesa. So you can see we have C2B. C2B, we already went through it. So it registers the things and validates transactions and confirms them. So yeah. So the other thing is STK push. So the STK push controller is here. So you make sure you create your STK push controller, and after you create your controller, then you create your routes here. So STK push will have one to simulate. This will, yeah, so this will take care of making the request. So this will call our dedicated class here. So the route, its work is just to make sure that the data is routed to the right place. So like I said, our payment classes are here. So the simulate route will call a simulate method inside the STK push controller. So we need, once you create your thing, you can have your public function simulate, and then maybe you can accept the request here. Request, and then so that's the method for simulating a transaction. And then we have another one to pick the callback feedback from Safaricom and route it to our dedicated class. So we just call it confirm. You can call it whatever you want. So for me, I'll just keep it like that. So we keep it as simple as this for starters. Cool. So we have our API routes ready. So whenever Safaricom sends us a transaction, we'll send for the callback, we'll send them this link for confirmation, and then they will send the transaction to this URL, and then we receive it and save it in our database. Cool. Right. So we are good now. So the next thing is for us to write our logic. Our logic, first of all, for simulating the transaction. So and also, if you haven't done that already, you also need to create a model. So this is just to interact with the database so that you don't save things directly to the database. You can create a model if you're using Laravel. So yeah, it just contains a fillable thing so that you can do mass assignment, and then you specify the table. So this table is what you have in your migrations. Here. Good. So this name is what you specify here, and STK push. So, but if your table is called STK push, you don't need to specify this. But in case it's giving you a problem, just specify it. No harm. Cool. So once you have that, it's now time for us to write our logic. So the place we are going to start is in our dedicated class. You can also call them service classes because they're not tied to anything else. They just provided as functionality to accept payments in our thing, in our website. So cool. So you can come here and go to mpesa.php. So this is for simulating transactions, for sending requests to Safaricom. STK push. So this first thing is what we need. I'll copy this up to this point. So we need to have the method function. Simulate. Remember, this is not the controller. This is just another class dedicated to that. So it's good programming practice to separate your logic, right? So we also had okay, so I think that's all we need. We already defined what these are. So in case you don't know, you can reread this, but we just define all those when we are starting. So let's see the things that we need for this. The first thing, let's see how we did this. So the first thing is to define our endpoints. That's the first thing we do here. So our endpoints for the live thing here, let's just copy from within our code. For the live, and then for the sandbox, cool. Yeah, I think that's good enough. So we don't need this part. So and then we also need to extend the validator. We created a validator in the last tutorial. This is just to get our endpoint. It validates our endpoint. You can add more things to be validated, but I think I just chose to validate the endpoints so that in case the endpoints are missing, it notifies you in case you forgot to set the endpoints. Cool. Right, so extends validator. Make sure you extend the right validator. This is our validator that we wrote by ourselves just to validate the endpoints. Cool. So what else do we need? I think that's it. So the first thing we want to do here, if we check how we went about it here, is to validate the endpoint. So we are going to accept the environment. And then the first thing we do is this validate endpoints and then environment. So that, yeah, cool. So once we validate the environment. We know we have the endpoints. We are sure we have the endpoints. Right, so let's see. The timestamp, we need the timestamp, and then we also need the passkey. So passkey, we can just say protected or private. Passkey. The other thing we need is short code. Let's see. The other thing we need is party A. So this is a little confusing. Party A. They said party A is what? Party A is the sender phone. So let's just call it sender phone so that we don't become confused. Party B is the organization, so receiving shortcode. Receiving shortcode. The other thing we need is, so we can do party A, this is so that we don't forget. Sender phone, receiving shortcode. Phone number. So phone number is STK push. We can just call it payer phone because this is the guy who's going to pay. So the guy who's going to pay is this payer phone, and then callback URL. So we can call it callback URL. So this callback URL, then account reference. We just call it account reference. Account reference. The last thing we need is the transaction type. Transaction type. Where is the transaction type? Transaction type. So the transaction for Mpesa Express is customer pay bill online. So we only have that. We can do transaction type. Can we just but let me just do this. Yeah, for consistency, but we can still just hard code it in here. So this result description. Let me see. We can call it remarks, and can leave it at that. Remarks, and then this transaction type, and then amount. We also the amount, very important. Amount same. And so the URL will be this endpoint. In case you're wondering where that comes from, it comes from this validator class. Once it validates, it sets the endpoint from this, and this one is provided here. So once you provide this, you call the method to validate, and then if it's successful, it sets automatically the endpoint, and you can just call it here. This is just clever programming to make our work easier, but you can do it however you want to do it. We need the token, but the token, I think we can just generate it once we get the environment. We can say token. We already had a token generator class, so new token generator. Generate token. Oops, sorry about that. So I'm supposed to do that here. Generate token environment. So cool. So once you got that, so our token is sorted. Cool. So business shortcode. So this one will be this shortcode. Did I just? Okay, let me just be consistent. And then passkey. Any other funny thing? Shortcode, and then this passkey, and then the timestamp. All right, so we can just leave it at that. So this shortcode. What's that? Shortcode, right? So cool. Right, so our everything else is cool. So our data string here is this, right? So once we get our response, we can JSON decode it, because it's a JSON object, and then we return it, so we can use it on the other end. So yeah. So you can add some more checks if you want to, but this is cool for now. Good. Now we need to add a bunch of methods here to set a few things for us. So public function set shortcode. Okay. Public function set shortcode, and then we string shortcode. This shortcode, cool, and then we return this, because we want to be able to chain the methods. Cool. So if you want to be able to write like whatever, then set something, and then in front here, and then you do set another thing, and then whatever. If you want to change them like that, you return that class. After you set your whatever, you return that class. So before you set the shortcode, you can also do a number of validations, like to check if the shortcode is the right one or whatever. But this is just a boilerplate. Yeah, cool. So remember, the aim of this tutorial is just to show you how you can build your own thing, because it's important also just to know how the things works if you're an engineer. Cool. So we have the shortcode and then pass key. So we should have started with pass key. Pass key. This is pass key. Cool. After shortcode, we have amount. So amount is can be a decimal, right? Okay, I mean just integer. You don't even need to do the type hinting. Just like doing it. Sender phone. Set. Send phone. There will be string phone. Send a phone. Okay. So the sender phone, then pay phone. So this is the guy who's going to receive the prompt, the STK prompt, STK push prompt, receiving shortcode. Cool. What else? Callback URL. Do you really have it? Right, so I've finished setting the setter methods for writing the setter methods for all these things. So our class, I think, is ready for now, at least to simulate. So the next thing we need to do is to write, so receiving the transaction, public function, confirm. So we need to pass the request. So once we pass that, so this is the point where we receive the data from Safaricom. So let's see. Yeah, okay. So we can go back to here, and then we look at the callbacks now. That was STK push, and all we need is this. So cool. So I'm just going to take this and turn it into an array. I would like us to prevent our classes from throwing errors in production that we are not aware of. So what we can do here is we can add a private property, and we can call it fail. That will be a boolean false, and then another private property, call it response. That will be an empty response. Cool. So now we can start from here. So we put this in a try catch. Try, so that it can capture the errors that we have. So it catches the exception, and so if there is that exception, so this, which means it failed, it's true, and our response will be get message. Cool. So that in case it throws errors in production, we're able to catch them in the controller and do whatever we need to do with it. So that's cool. So once we have these private properties, the way we are going to return them is through a public function called failed, and its work is just to return this failed. And then we also have another public function to return the response. We get response, and its work is just to return response. Good. So we'll be checking using this and getting the response using that. Cool. So from here, now I can say our response is that, so that we just return this class so that we can do more with it. And we say, so we just set this response is that. Cool. So in case you want to check for anything else here, you can just check for it, and then you make sure you set the response and you return this. So good. So now to our confirm method. So this confirm method is what will be used to confirm our payload. And so the data that will come from Safaricom will be confirmed here. So the first thing we need to do is to pick the payload from the request. So that will be so with JSON decode request get content. So this is going to give us an object. It's going to decode it from a JSON object to a PHP object that we can use now to load our data. So the data that we want, you remember this STK pushes the service class, and this other one is the model. So we want these values from our payload. So data, so these are the values that we need in order to save the records to the database. So we need all this. Cool. So once we're there, so our next step, of course, is to try and load the record from the database. Yeah, because when you're confirming, remember you have to save it first in the database, and then when we want now to just confirm the payload, we load it from the database, and then we update the details and save it. But before that, I want us to look at something here. I added a repository for Mpesa integration snippets, and if you check here, you can find SDK push callback sample, and this is just a sample of the callback that you receive from Safaricom. So in there you have the body, then the SDK callback, and then the merchant request ID. So that is what we want to load, this and this first, so that we can use them to load our record from the database. So that is the first thing we need is the merchant request ID. Merchant request ID. So that would be payload, body, STK callback, and then merchant request ID. Cool. But before we even try this, I think we need to check first of all if we have the property ID. Yeah, we need to first of all check if we have. So if property exists, inside that's the payload. If payload has the body property, what have I done here? Yeah, good. The next one is the checkout request ID. Checkout request ID, that would be checkout request ID, and then so I want to try and load an STK push record from the database. So STK push model So we do the STK push the model now, where so where the merchant request ID is equal to that merchant request ID, and also where the checkout request ID is the same as this, and that is the first record. Cool. So now that we are able to load that, so now we can set our data like we did. So to set our data, we need first of all to check those records. Of course, we have the merchant request ID. We have the merchant request ID, and then we have the checkout request ID. So we need to check for the rest. How do we load them? So what we need is result description. I think we just do the same thing as here. So result description will be cool, and result code will be, so this is the description. Code, and then the amount. So now the amount will be this. So the way we would access this is so payload body and then STK callback. So inside STK callback, we need to go to callback method data, and then you pick the first item, that will be the amount, and then we pick its value. So the first item will give us this object, and then inside that object we just pick the value. We just pick the value. Sorry about that. So yeah, this is how we do it. The Mpesa receipt number is the second index, and the second index is index 1. Transaction date is the third index, and the third index is at 2. And lastly, the phone number is at the third index, and the fourth index, and the fourth index is at 3. Sorry. So cool. So now that we have our data from the payload, and before we even attempt to do this, we need to check that the result code is actually, I forgot to return this to its value. Okay, so, and we need to check that the result code is actually 0. That means success. And then this one was supposed to be the merchant request ID. Cool. Yeah, so we just check if it's successful, and if the payload has the body, that's when we try to do this. Cool. So once we are there, now we need to check, were we able to load the model? So if we were able to load the model, if if we have the model, we just do, we fill it with the data, and then we save it. If not, we create it, STK push, we create a new record in the database, and we save everything. Cool. I think that would be awesome. So where are we? So if that's not the case, then we say that our thing has failed. And if our thing has failed, we can return this class here. So it will just check if we have failed. Yeah, it's just going to check if we have failed, and that'll be it. So I don't think there's any much to do there. So it's going to tell, can we just have a default response and unknown, card. Good, so we can leave it at that, so that we just be told an unknown error card. While trying to confirm. Cool. You can add more flesh to it. I think this is just cool for now. We just leave it like that. Cool. I think that's okay. The other thing that we need to do now is to build our controllers. So I think this is just sufficient. This is sufficient. So the next thing is we need to go to the controllers, and so SDK Push Controller. First thing you need is to simulate. So when we are simulating, we need some values from the front end, and these values we need to validate them first. So I usually prefer to use a request. So PHP artisan make request Mpesa STK push simulate, that is simulate request. Then once it's created, we check in our requests here. Good, and we authorized. You can do more checks here, but I'll just authorize it for now. And then we have a bunch of things that we need in order to simulate. So in order to simulate, we start our simulator. So STK push simulator, new STK push the service class, and then we have set what. So we need we start with the shortcode, and then we end with simulate. So the simulate thing needs the environment, so the environment will load it like this. And config So we'll go to misc.mpesa.env. Remember, this is configuration that we already made. So this, you go here, then there's Mpesa here. You can see environment is here. So misc, Mpesa, environment. When you want to come to STK push, misc, Mpesa, STK push, and then your environment variable, and then whatever you want to pull. So for example, now we want this, and if it's missing, we just use sandbox. And then, so if we are able to load our configuration, this, so config, so that would be misc.mpesa.stk push dot now n. So everything we do will be inside this bracket, right? So when you're simulating, we need to return some response to the user. So I'll just call this private result desk, because we'll use this for Mpesa too. So result description, we just say and then we also need a HTTP code. By default it's an error 400 rejected, and yeah, cool. I think that's cool for now. So else if config is not found, we can say this result desk STK push request failed, and then you say missing important parameters. Okay, you can write a better thing there, but for me I think that will be sufficient. Yeah, cool. So the other thing that I need to do otherwise, so once we are done, we can return a response, JSON response, where the message this result disk, and then the HTTP code, the status code will be this HTTP code. Otherwise, set shortcode. So our shortcode will be config shortcode. Cool. The next thing we need to set is set pass key. So this is pass key. Next thing is the amount that will come from the request by the way, so we can start validating here. Once we get our amount, we need to validate here. So make sure that our amount is, this is now our request. So our validation rules we are going to put here, and you say we want it is required, and it is numeric also, numeric. That's our amount. What's the next thing we need? We need the sender. Sender phone. Be sender phone. We need to verify that also. Sender phone required. We can just say max 191, or what is it, 20. 20 is there a phone number greater than that? I don't think so. Sender phone, and then payer phone, same fate. So here we also need to do them. Set payer phone. So the other thing is set account reference. Account reference, you can just go account reference, and you can also say and also the account reference here, required maximum 20. Yeah, there's no account number greater than that. And then here, instead of having this kind of request, we do Mpesa STK push request. Cool. So before even starts doing anything here, it's going to validate using these rules. Cool. So I think you're good. And now the other thing that we need to do is we need to pass the receiving shortcode. Set receiving shortcode. So it will be the same as this. And then callback URL. Callback URL. That will be a route, and the route will be, if we check our routes, API, that will be api.mpesa.confirm. api.mpesa.confirm, and then the validation key will be config validation key. So additionally, you can also check, you can just check this array for this one, and this one. So if they are missing, you can throw something, you can do something like this, result take whatever, and then you return the response. Cool. So I think that's cool. The validation, it's confirmation. Let me just confirm here. Yeah, it's called the confirmation key. So it's the confirmation key. So I think that's all that we need. And then when we are simulating, we need to pass the environment. So our environment, we pass it here. Cool. So now we say if our simulator does not fail, we can just this HTTP code, we give it 200 for success. cool. Yeah, I think that's fine. Is there anything else? Cool, so I think that is fine. So simulate. We're going to try that in a few. So the next one is to confirm. So this one, its work is just to take the feedback, to take the Mpesa feedback and then pass it to our STK push simulator. So confirm. So STK push confirm. So before even we go there, I want us to check something here. Developer. So before we even start, I want us to check something here. In the APIs in the documentation, if you check the docs, if you come here to Mpesa result, there is response code. So there's something we need to send back to Mpesa once we have confirmed. So response codes are sent from client's endpoints back to the gateway. This is done to acknowledge that the client has received the result. So for C2B is 0, but success is 0, but for all other APIs is all these zeros here, and to reject any other number. So in order to implement that in our code, we're going to do, so result disk, we can also say result code, right? A result code, and that will be 1. So by default we reject. Cool. So once we do that, now the first thing, of course, is to load the environment. Load the environment, and then since we are confirming here, we check our confirmation key. So if so we also need to load our confirmation key. So our confirmation key will be that, then STK push, and then dot. So use double, and then cool. So that, and then confirmation key. So this needs to be in here. Cool. So this hopefully is going to load our confirmation key. So we just say if request confirmation key is not equal to our confirmation key, we say this result disk equals to so we can just say STK push confirmation failed, STK push confirmation failed. And the reason is confirmation key mismatch. Cool. So mismatch is written like that, confirmation. So I think we are going to need more than this because we need to log the error also. log, Laravel log, the log facade, and then we say this will be emergency error. You can just say error. Yeah, cool. So our result description is that. Cool. So we need to log if any error happens, we just log it so that we can be able to find it. So that part is cool. So now the next thing is to call our class here. Is to call our method, our confirm method, and our confirm method doesn't even need much. It doesn't require much, so the much that we are going to give it is just to STK push confirm. Is there another one? Okay, it's here, sorry. Yes, I was wondering what's going on. New SDK push confirm request. So that's it. So if our request fails, sorry, not request, STK push confirm failed, we are going to need to set this result code. I think if it doesn't fail, actually, so we need, if it doesn't fail, our result code, we return it to 0 so that it's going to be successful. Anyway, in fact, we need to do this. If it failed, if it doesn't, this, so if it failed, we need to log the error, so SDK push confirm. So the error will be get response, so we log our response from the other side. Cool. So our result code remains the same, but if it doesn't fail, it means it's okay, and at that point we can access, we can accept the transaction, and we can just set this result description. You can just say success, and then is there anything else? And then we can just return so if this is what happened, I think everything should happen only if the confirmation key matches. So I'll bring this down here, and the rest of this I'll just push it a little. Cool. Yeah. Confirmation key. If it doesn't match, if it matches, in fact, if it matches, that's when that's only when we can do that. But if it doesn't, sorry about that. If it doesn't match, then that's when we can set this. And let's go. Yeah. So this should be our last thing, and you can remove it from here. Wait a minute. Yes, the same thing. Yeah, so if our confirmation key matches with what has been sent, it means it's not a spoofed transaction, probably. And cool, and you can do that. Good. So at the end of everything, in case any other error occurs, cool, we log it here. So at the end of everything, we need to return a response to Safaricom, so we just do return response. You can just do JSON, and right now we don't need much. We just need, so everything that we are going to return to Safaricom is going to be in caps. So result code, that's the most important. That will be this result code, and the result description will be this result description. Cool. And just like that, we are done with writing our methods. So now everything should be working fine. Our next thing is to test our methods before we move them to production and try to do anything with them. Cool. So now everything looks cool. Right, so I think everything should be fine now. It should be fine. So I'm going direct to Postman, and I had already tried to do this, so I'm going to try to push this transaction to the callback. But we first of all want to test the simulate endpoint. So let's just go ahead and do that. See what we get. Mpesa.api api.mpesa.confirm. So there's an error somewhere. api.mpesa. What are we calling this? Let me just close this. It's STK Push. I forgot this. STK Push. STK Push. An error occurred. So what kind of error was that? It's showing 500 and error occurred. Alright, so I think we need to do this. If it fails, that's when we do that. Otherwise, our result description here will be the message from Safaricom. So that will be STK Push Simulator. This whatever this result desk, get response. Cool. Yeah, nice. So if it fails, if it doesn't fail, that is, I think I need to do this one. Can remove this. So this, we need to set it whether it fails or not, so that we can get our message from Safaricom. Cool. So I think we were getting it's showing an error because we didn't invalid remarks. So this is our feedback from Safaricom. So we can just set remarks here. Set remarks. We can just say pay bill. Pay your bill. Cool. So success. Very nice. So Safaricom sent the feedback to this URL and we weren't there to accept it, so cool. So our simulator is working exemplarily well. Now the next thing that we need to check is the confirm request. So this one, for this one we need to send this callback example. Yeah, so we just use of std class as array. So where's the STK push line 94 STK push line 94 94. Okay, what was it supposed to be like? I'll have to copy this other guy. So SDK push. Oh, sorry, I forgot one thing. I think I forgot this. I forgot this part. So we need also to get an extra level. That's all. Cool. And by the way, I think there's something we forgot. So when we are asking to simulate, yeah, I think it will be prudent to let this model handle everything. So we can just do response like that, and this response is that, and because we want to use it somewhere here, and all we need is this. So we need this check also. So the response, of course, will be JSON. So we can create can create the initial transaction that is incomplete, and then when Safaricom hits our endpoint with this data, we will update it. So we'll see that in a second. And the response is supposed to be the response. These ones are the array items. This is supposed to be like this. Cool. Just like that. So if it's not an error, if this property exists and whatever the result code is okay, you can create that. Right, so cool. So it's checking this if it failed. So otherwise, if that's not the case, we can just assume that it failed and we do this. So I think that's a good check for us there, and then we can return everything. Very nice. So simulate. Cool. So that's okay. It's okay. Now, we need to try that again. We need to try pushing that again. First of all, we need to try and push this again. Cool. And then we take this value. This value, we put it here. And then this value also. Put it here. And then we try to push it to the database. Builder create must be of type array. Now I'll give it. Alright, so this is where I mess up. Oh my goodness. Let's just leave it like that. So it's saying it's successful. I think that will work for now. Right, so I finished deploying my code to production, and so the next thing is for us to test it in Postman. So right away, let me just do that. I've set up Postman. And the first thing is we want to try and push. So I'm going to try to push one bomb to my account, and this is the reference number. Even though you're not using it for now, I'll confirm some more later. So you just this link, this link API version 1 mtrx STK push simulate. So you make sure you rename those links for security in your application. Yeah, and that would be cool. Let's just try that and see. Cool. So see the notification, and my work is just to input the pin. And just like that. So we want to compare the transaction number. So one send to Safaricom, whatever. Yeah, so let me just refresh to see if there's anything. Cool. Yeah, so this is it. OH279DL9F5. Good. So we are receiving STK push transactions, and yeah,